This is the first blush of the 23-24 budget. And remember, this is really based upon very preliminary information. You'll see that the budget is currently out of balance, but that is pretty typical for this time of year, very typical for this time of the year, and we still have a lot of refinements to make. So the district, just as we talked about with some of the equity issues or bullying, harassing issues, what our guiding principle is the district's strategic plan and mission statement to provide the best education possible for each and every student. And we want to certainly sustain the quality Mount Lebanon education experience in academics, arts, athletics, activities. And as always, our guiding philosophy is continuous improvement because we know we can always do better. Mount Lebanon has never been a district where we just sit and rest on our laurels. Lawyers, right. Scope of operation. We put this slide in last year because we really want to make sure that the community and the board understands what a large operation this school district is. So budget about $116 million. We average right around 5,500 students, give or take a few. We issue 1,000 W-2s, which is kind of interesting. So that doesn't mean we have 1,000 teachers, but that includes everybody from ticket takers to classroom aides to support staff. You name it, anybody we give any money to, we issue W-2s to. We have 10 buildings, and I don't want that to get lost on anybody. 10 buildings in a school district our size is a challenging situation to continue to maintain and operate in a really efficient manner. If, as you all know, if we had one big building, it'd be a lot more efficient to staff that building. We would have less delivery trucks going between buildings. But in the Mount Lebanon School District and in the community that I live in, we value our neighborhood elementary schools, and we value our kids being able to walk to and from school. So 10 buildings is a lot in a district our size. 473 classrooms, 1 million plus square footage. We got playgrounds everywhere out there. We have 5 major athletic fields that we maintain, 53.2 acres of space that Mr. Marciniak and his team are responsible. Being a non-busing district, we still have 5 school buses that are in use very heavily to take our kids to and from activities, after school, before school, during the day. And then we have 17 other vehicles that we use to operate our district. 15 curriculum areas. We have 38 sports at both the high school and middle school. 35 budget managers. That's everyone from Mary Beth, Dr. Dave, Ron, Rick, department chairs, you name it. There are a lot of people that have responsibilities for parts of the budget. In addition, we have at least 32 clubs and activities. Those are always in flux as students come to teachers and ask for new programs, new clubs. We value that as something that we think is important in education. We also run a comprehensive federal programs that supply the district with certain targeted money for very specific areas. And both Dr. Gill and Dr. Irvin have been overseeing that. We also have a full menu of summer programs, and that program has grown a little bit as from the pandemic. We learned a few things, and our offerings have increased a little bit for summer programs. We run a comprehensive adult education program in the evenings, 9 departments. We have a technology department that has 8,000 plus devices, and we run a standalone food service program that is self-funding, but it has about 67 employees and $2.5 million in annual turnover in there. So it's big, it's large, it's a comprehensive organization, and I think we do a good job in managing those assets. We always show this slide, expenditures. Whoops, I skipped the revenues first. You got to have the money before you can spend the money, right? So revenues, 77% of our budget comes from local sources. And that's based upon some aid ratio requirements from the state. And we get a certain amount of money based upon a specific formula for that. We also have taxes in our community. So that's where we get most of our resources for our schools. Our community contributes significantly to our schools because they value education. And as I mentioned, they value that neighborhood school model. State subsidies have increased a little bit. We also know that Governor Shapiro did put forward a budget plan, but we have not heard any feedback on that as to how likely it is to go through completely. And just a reminder that some of our federal grants that we received during the pandemic are gone, so we're back down to pre-pandemic levels. Expenditures. 78% of our budget is tied up in salaries, benefits for our employees, and driven by the collective bargaining agreements. And as a school district and as the services that we offer, we know that they are people intense, and that's where the majority of our money is spent. Once you add the 10% of debt service, which we carry, in debt service payments, about 88% of our budget is already completed before we even turn a light on or buy a ream of paper. That's Rob's writing there. So he wants to make sure that before we do anything, you know that probably 88% of our budget is already filled out. We started thinking about our budget in a model called student-centered budgeting, and we adopted that probably 10 years ago in a way to conceptualize how we allocate our resources. And as you can see, the largest part of that is students in the classroom. And as I said on the previous slide, about 78% of our money is tied up in people, and a lot of that, a majority of that, is our students in the classroom. So from there, you go out from school-based instructional support, school-based operational support, like our maintenance, custodio, district-based instructional support, like people like Dr. Davis, Dr. Irvin, and then finally out district-based operational support to make sure that all of our programs run well. So a conceptual framework that just helps us to think about how we utilize our budget. As we mentioned, 80% of our money is for students and classrooms and in their support. And then the light blue, purple, and red focus on academics. So that's how we are supplying our classrooms with students. This is a question that always kind of pops up. Where are we in comparison with other people? So the state average of per pupil cost. So how they determine this is they take your whole budget and they divide it by the number of students you have. It's about, state average is $19,780. Our regional average, which is in the Allegheny Intermediate Unit, is about $22,000. Our peer average, you know that we have a group of peers that we compare ourselves to, is right around that same amount, $22,617. And in Mount Lebanon, we spend $19,566.20. And some people would say, well, you don't have buses. You don't provide transportation to your school. So if you included that, it would be much larger than that. But let me tell you, I'll go back to the statement I made earlier. running 10 neighborhood schools is much more expensive than running 2 or 3 large schools just based upon providing services in those areas. So that's kind of a snapshot of where we are with cost per pupil. So general budget issues for 23-24. I think Mr. Galetko has outlined these before. Inflation is running about 8.6%. Act 1 from 2006 gave us some limitations on millage rates, and I will define Act 1 a little bit later, a couple slides down, so I'll talk a little bit more about what Act 1 does. There was another suit brought in the city for the county about common level ratio. So we certainly have to be mindful of that lawsuit as how it will impact us. But according to our tax consultants, it doesn't look like that common level ratio will have too big of impact on us. As I mentioned, Governor Shapiro did present a budget, but it's still very early in those stages. And Rob wrote here that the governor's budget shows an atypical increase. So it's a little bit more than what we've seen in the past, probably somewhere in the $1 million plus range. So we're taking a look at that. There was also a fair funding lawsuit that was recently resolved, and that was called the PARS suit, which is the Pennsylvania Association of Rural Schools, that talked about establishing a fair funding formula across the Commonwealth. That has a long way to go until it's actually operationalized. We know that the ruling was set forth, but it takes a long time for our legislators to figure out how to operationalize that and modify the funding formula. But for next year, we don't think that's going to have a big impact. As you know, our House and Senate are controlled by 2 different political parties, so that could present some challenges for us. Another big one is healthcare costs. The Allegheny County Health Consortium came out suggesting that they may increase our contribution to healthcare 18%. I have a slide that shows you what that means coming up. As we mentioned, supplies are increasing, the cost of supplies are increasing, and certainly we are continuing to see special education expenditures rise, including some of our ESL program. Always looking at enrollment to see if we're going to have any huge spikes or huge drops. I think the last time we did that when the baby boomers came through some of our schools and they were busting at the seams. But at least for the 14 years that I've been here, and probably for the decade before I was here, about 5,500 kids is what we are usually operating at. We see a little bit of a decline next year in the numbers just because we have a very large senior class that's graduating, and as of right now, the kindergarten class isn't completely filling that whole void. So we do look at those numbers, but we don't see any significant change coming. Staffing changes. One of the ways that the board can manage their expenditures is to look at what we are spending money on. This one focuses only on the staffing that we have in the district, the people that we have in the district. Since 2009, and that happens to be the year that I came, we have seen a decline 17% in administration, and I feel that we operate a lean, very effective administrative team, even with that drop in administrators. Our clerical staff has stayed consistent throughout that time. We've seen a decline in specialists. Those would be people like tech. We used to have a person who just did video recordings. Some of that has gone by the wayside, so we've been able to capture some savings there and see a reduction in our specialists.
Dr. Steiner, were the curriculum Supervisors part of that specialist group or part of the
They were
administrators?
part of the administrative group. Custodians, we actually increased our space a little bit when we renovated the high school, but we're running just about even on custodians. The big increase you'll see there is personal care assistants, and we've talked about that a few times. Students in their IEPs often have written additional support from adults, and we do supply that to our program. Classroom teachers stayed just about stable, 429 to 432. I'll talk about that in a minute a little bit. But really about a 3% change in adults, and all of that certainly could be pointed back to the personal care assistants. Okay. I'm sorry, I should have taken a break, taken a breath and asked if there were any questions.
No.
I think you're smart enough to just jump in and get me, okay.
Jump in, yeah.
Employee considerations, as many of you know, we are in negotiations with our teachers union. Those are ongoing. We still feel that they're being productive. We think that we're making some movement in those and hope to have that wrapped up by the end of the year. So, but those numbers still aren't completely solidified. The board also has contracts with most of their other employee groups, our secretaries, our food service workers, our custodians, and so we have some contractual requirements that we have to meet. As I mentioned, healthcare, potential increase of 18%. The good news is we did have about 15 teachers retire this year. I want to correct that because I don't want anybody to think good news teachers retired. We see a cost savings when a top of the salary teacher retires and they're replaced by maybe a master's degree step 4 faculty member. That doesn't mean they're any better than the person who's leaving. Some of those teachers who were retiring are some of our finest teachers, but we always work hard to recruit teachers to replace them. So we see some savings in that. So a $50,000, $120,000 teacher with benefits included, and then we can bring a new teacher in probably somewhere in the $70,000 range. So we see that delta in savings. And former business manager told us that if you have about 10, that's a good sign. And so this year we have about 15.
And Dr. Steinhauer, just to go back to the slide or two ago, well, in my question, you don't have to.
Okay.
It's fine. Our student population is not decreasing, right. So we would be looking to replace
Yes.
all of those positions.
If necessary.
Budget, yeah.
I mean, we look very closely when we talk about Dr. Davis, Dr. Irvin looking at staffing. We really do look at it very closely, and if we can reduce teachers, we do. If we need to add, then I would come to the board and ask for some additions. But we really try to stay within our staffing numbers and try to make some of those replacements if possible. Okay, that healthcare issue, Rob has it in here 3 times. So they came out with a big number at sometime in the fall and said, hey, school districts, and this is part of the consortium in Allegheny County, Butler County, Lawrence County, Beaver County. Our consortium is gigantic. We are self-funding health consortium. It's been very cost efficient for us throughout the years. And but they're seeing some significant spikes in some of their increases, some of their claims during COVID, and they're suggesting that it may be as high as 18%. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be 18%, but I think they're putting out the largest number that they think could potentially happen. And for the Mount Lebanon School District, an 18% increase in healthcare costs is $1.8 million, or or 0.77 mils. So it's going to have, that in alone will have a pretty significant impact on us. This slide, I know it's a little bit hard to see, but it just shows you the dark is the national trend. So the national trend was a little bit higher than our local trend, but you can see maybe some of those years of not increasing rates maybe caught up to us a little bit, and that's why they're throwing in that big number right now. But hopefully at the end of the month, we will have a much more solid number that they're going to give us. So they're looking at that right now. Some positive things that are happening. Interest income has returned to pre-pandemic levels. So as you know, over the pandemic, interest rates kind of took a dive, and we weren't seeing much in income from investments, but that's back to pre-pandemic levels. This suggests that our community is pretty healthy. Our earned income tax is trending upward of what we initially estimated. Our local unemployment rate is 2%. I think Allegheny County is about 4.3%, so we outpace that a little bit. We're seeing realty transfer taxes trending upward. If a house comes on the market in Mount Lebanon, it goes pretty quick, and that's a positive thing for us. Not seeing as many houses that people would like to see on the market, but certainly when they do come up, they go pretty quickly. State revenues, last year they did increase, and as we mentioned with the governor's budget, that may increase a little bit more. Two challenges that we've had, and I think we expressed this prior, some outside placements for some of our students with special needs has increased, and that brings along with it some transportation costs, additional costs. And also our ESL population has increased pretty significantly. So we're seeing some of those changes occur in the Mount Lebanon School District. So Ms. Flesher said, so what are we getting for the money that we're putting into the schools? And as a taxpayer,
Exactly what I said.
yes, as a taxpayer, you certainly want to be assured that there are some value-added things in the base budget. So in addition to our continuing our strong educational arts and athletic programs, these are the things that we built into the budget for this year. Our SRO, that's our school resource officer. We jointly fund that with the municipality, so we pay a portion of his time and the municipality pays a portion of his time. That's included. Girls wrestling was recently approved as a PIAA sport, and so we're happy that Mount Lebanon does have a team, and we're ready and willing to support that next year. So you'll see girls wrestling. Boys volleyball. The board also had a request from the community to take a look and to see if we can't revitalize boys volleyball. The costs for that are included in this base budget. Educational software and ebooks. I think we've tried to explain to the board that we're not seeing many of the hard-bound books coming through anymore. It's moving towards software and ebooks, and we certainly, the money for the things that we need are in there. I think a goal that the board set at the beginning of the year with some of our employee group negotiations was to make sure that every employee at the district at least started at $15 an hour, and all of that is included in the budget. We've included some money for DEI initiatives. Dr. Irvin has prepared 2 RFPs to go out for maybe some professional services to do some things like a curriculum audit, maybe a programmatic audit too. So we did build in some professional services money into that. So if the board identifies some DEI initiatives, we can certainly add those. As Rob mentioned last month, we moved some of the capital projects from a capital project account to the operating budget because they were things that we were doing every year, and they weren't very specific. It was replace so many feet of asphalt. And so we moved that over to the operating budget for both maintenance, and we also did that for technology, some of the hardware that we are buying for that. People-wise, we added, these are positions that we added this year or continued this year. One, we continued, but we added a school nurse at the beginning of the year. And that was grant funded for this year, and it will be grant funded for next year. So in 2 years, you'll have a decision to make about how we staff our school nursing operations. We added 3 special education teachers this year, and those were to address student needs. I know Markham, Dr. Irvin, do you remember what schools? Dr. Davis?
It's a shared position between Markham and Washington. We added a shared position between Lincoln and Washington. So for obvious reasons, when we build staffing, we'll reallocate that. And I feel like the third one, wasn't that a secondary one? Half Jefferson Elementary, half Jefferson Middle.
Yep. We added 3 elementary teachers to address some class size issues as we were going through the staffing process. I think kindergarten and first grade where we added those at the time. So we remind the community that when we do staffing, we're very careful about making sure we're looking at class sizes, we're looking at equity throughout the district. One of the things that we remind people is that with 7 elementary schools, it is almost impossible to have the exact same number of students in every class throughout the district. So there's going to be some variability in there, but we do take a look at those. But we did add 3 elementary teachers this year, and we're going to ask the board to maintain those. We added 6 support staff. We have a teacher who is currently on special assignment. This is their year 2 special assignment. I asked the board for about a 3-year plan. So next year would be the final phase of implementation of Schoology. Certainly something that you'll need to talk about as you move into next year. And we also have part-time. We had a teacher working with our ELA curriculum, and we believe that we can move that teacher to a full-time special assignment to help out with the new ELA program, and we think we'll be able to fund that through the grant. So those, to me, are some of the, in addition to the very comprehensive, very strong, high-standard educational program that we offer here, these are some of the things that we are adding that are in the base budget for going forward.
Dr. Steinhardt, just to clarify though, some of these are already in this current year's budget, right? In other words, those 3 teachers is not additional.
Well, they
unless I'm
weren't
misunderstanding.
in the budget.
They weren't.
Okay.
So we found the resources in this current year's budget
Got
to
it.
cover those costs.
So all of these are an additional.
Yes.
They're not currently, yeah.
Yeah. So they are built into the base budget as we go forward. They weren't last year when we started. But, you know, in a $110 million budget, we do have to leave some room so that if a situation like this pops up, we have the ability to cover it. So we're very careful on how we budget.
Are those teachers here now on temporary contracts or not? The 3 that we added?
They can only, they're considered to be contracts unless they're added after the very first day of school with students. So I believe that special one of the special education pieces is probably a long-term sub. I have to go back and look.
But
That would have been Heather's responsibility.
Ms. Burdick, whenever we add a real position, we have to call that a permanent position. Adding substitutes only occurs if somebody leaves in the middle of the year, they have some major medical issue, that's when you can have a substitute. But in order to put a permanent teacher in, or in order to put a classroom teacher in at the beginning of the year, that is a permanent position. Right, Dr. Irvin? Thank you.
But that's a contract that
That's a
ends,
contract.
that ends June 30th when they,
No, it's here forever.
Okay.
So one of the things that the board always has to be careful about is when you add a contractual position, those positions stay. School code does not allow you to furlough teachers for economic reasons. You can only furlough teachers for if you dropped a program. Say we dropped the English program, right? Then we could furlough all of those English teachers. And the other reason you can do it for a significant decline in enrollment. So if nobody signs up for theater, for a theater program, we don't need a theater teacher, so we could demonstrate to the state, we had to demonstrate to the state that one of those two conditions existed. So once you hire a person, you've got that person. Now, the good news is, we always have retirements too. So if the board decided that they weren't going to replace some of those retirees, they would move into some of those slots. So we would be covered that way.
I have a question. Last month, when we were discussing capital projects, one of the things that we discussed was elementary school playgrounds. And how are we going to fund them equitably moving forward? I know this has also been brought up at our PTA council meetings as well. Is funding or creating a pool of money for funding those playgrounds in this budget?
It is not currently in the base budget. One of the things that we're looking for some direction from the board is how much do you want to put in those savings accounts to move forward? So that's not included in the base budget right now. But it's a priority that the board has set, so we know that we'll have that conversation as the budget moves along.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the sustainability initiatives that were raised, like electronic,
EV cars,
yeah,
yeah.
or solar panel, those things are also
Not.
going to be at the discretion of the board to add to the base budget.
So here's the one that I said at the very beginning. This is a very preliminary starting point. We anticipate revenues to be about $110 million. That does not include any new money that the governor talked about, because we're still trying to process that and trying to think what a good number would be to put in there. The picture gets clearer and clearer as the board gets to May. So that number will get refined as we move forward. Expenditures, we have just kind of put in everything that everyone has asked for, and we are in the process now of going through and determine what is critical to the mission of the district. Some things won't make the cut, but certainly from a programmatic standpoint, we are not looking to make any major cuts unless the board gives us that direction. So we're at about $5.9 million. We're not, that seems like a large number. We're not worried about it because we still have a lot of work to do. Rob wrote a little note here. Last year, we started about at 7.1 million out of balance. And so we will get to that spot. Historic millage rate, you can see from 13-14, a couple years of zero millage increase, a couple years right below the index. Last couple years, we've gone up to 0.80 to cover some of our costs. So that's kind of a historic millage rate increase. Issues not finalized. As we mentioned, Dr. Davis and Dr. Irvin will be doing staffing. PDE does have some guidelines for nurses, special education teachers, the number of people that can be on their caseloads, and the impact of retirees. Rob's going through right now to determine what their current cost is and what the cost would be if we replace them with a Step 2 master's degree teacher, and so we'll capture some of those savings. Unfortunately, our legislators don't approve a budget until June 30th, but by that time, we should have a really good understanding of where it's going to go. But in some years, it's gone into September, October. That's up to our state legislators to get that accomplished. Federal funding allocations, those are formulaic based upon the number of students they have, the kind of community that we have, the number of free and reduced students that we have, that qualify for free and reduced lunch. That has some impact on it. As I mentioned, the pending common level ratio lawsuit that's out there, we don't think is going to have much impact on us, so we'll look at that more closely. Health insurance rates, the fifth time we've talked about health insurance rates, and some of our challenges with the cost of special education placements. A couple of the board members made a really good suggestion to us to take a look at our placements. I think we have about 39 students in outside placements, to see if there was any way that we're able to bring some of those students back into the district. But that's something that Dr. Gill is looking through right now. So we're hopeful that maybe we can bring back, a few students and hire a teacher in-house to cover that, which would be cheaper than some of our outside placements. But we'll give you some more information as we move for that. Next steps, reduce and refine. Refine our revenues, refine our expenditures. One of the goals that the board has talked to the administration about is to stop relying on the use of fund balance. So as you know, we've been somewhere, I know Rob has a chart that shows how much we've used in fund balance, and our goal is to get it down to zero, obviously, so that the district doesn't have to rely on fund balance. We think we may be able to do that this year, but we still have a little bit more work to do. Another thing that we can do is look for increasing some of our charges for services. I know we charge for an activity fee, we charge for some student parking, we charge for use of our facilities. We can look at some of those. That's not going to be a ton of money, but it certainly would be a little bit of money to look at. We'll have conversations with the board if they want to see any programmatic reductions or staffing reductions. The board will kind of lead those discussions with us, but I think kind of right now is at the hold harmless level with some of those value-added things that I mentioned a few minutes ago. For the timeline, Mr. Galecko has a presentation next Wednesday. Is that the 22nd? Yeah. He'll be doing it in this room. He'll go into much greater detail on some of the slides, give some additional information, talk a little bit about school business operations. It's a very comprehensive view. I think we have posted some of the old ones, Kristen, is that right? We have some of the old ones up there, but every year he adds a few things, and I think that's a worthwhile one to either watch through Zoom, come into this room, or watch it online. We'll put that up there. So that's kind of the board's timeline. We had to make a final budget approval on May 22nd, and then we submit that to the state. And of course, return on investment. Our schools continue to do well. Our students continue to do well. And I think the investment that our community makes in education is well worth it. So that's where we are. Doesn't seem like anybody's too overly concerned, but concerned that we have a lot of work to dig into. And I certainly appreciate the board's seriousness of effort as we've been talking through some of these issues. And there'll be more to come next week.
Thank you, Dr. Steinhauer, very much.